For all verified facts, subscribe to our YouTube channel and click the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Hello and welcome. There's an electric vehicle revolution that's been happening. If you haven't noticed already, there's a procession or a fleet of cars and even two-wheelers, if you could call that a procession, that are now joining the long list of vehicles that have been launched or are going to be launched. The latest being from Ola, the company that's otherwise known for its ride-hailing app, but has now launched a two-wheeler under the name of Ola Electric. That's the company. So the question that we want to pose and would like an answer to is, firstly, what are electric vehicles? How do electric vehicles work? How are they different from internal combustion engines or petrol or diesel engines that we've known about? And let's focus a little more on two-wheelers. And how is it different and how could it be different if you were to go and buy one tomorrow and start using it? To answer that question, we have the best person in this country, perhaps, to answer them. Hormazd Sorabjee, editor of Autocar India, joining us now. Hormazd, thank you very much for joining us. So tell us, as someone who's covered internal combustion engines or regular engines, as we all know them, with fuel all your life, what are electric vehicles, what are electric vehicle engines, and how are they different fundamentally?
Right. Well, firstly, Govind, thanks for having me. Happy to be here. Yeah, I mean, it is EVs, electric vehicles are really the flavor of the month or the day. But, you know, it's still a long way from becoming a complete reality, which will come together later. But I think what is really driving electric vehicles and the fundamental difference between them and IC engines is just one thing, and that's carbon or carbon-based fuels. You know, all IC engines run on hydrocarbons, and by nature, they emit carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide, the gas is, we know now, is responsible for global warming. It's reached really emergency proportions. I think, you know, the planet is really in a very precarious situation as far as global warming goes. We've seen all the weather patterns. I mean, even we are feeling it the way, you know, let's say even on the western seaboard, we never had it earlier. We always knew of storms in from the Bay of Bengal, but even right now, you know, we've been hammered with cyclones, crazy rain, crazy weather patterns, and it's all fundamentally down to global warming. And I think that's the fundamental difference. Like EVs, they don't emit anything at all, whereas IC engines, they emit CO2 just by the way they want, because they burn hydrocarbons. The earlier problem also with IC engines was they were very polluting, but that has been taken care of to a large extent by a lot of cleanup technologies and tighter emission norms. So you can clean up the nasty pollutants, but you can't do anything about CO2, because what goes in has to come out. And so you know, the best possible thing that can come out from IC engine is water and CO2. Now, water is not poisonous at all, but CO2 is also not poisonous. So from a health point of view, it's not an issue, but from a global warming perspective, it is an issue. And with EV, there's no emission at all, because it's just an electric motor. I mean, it's just running on electricity, which is a very clean energy source. Of course, how the electricity is generated, if it's generated using thermal, that's a different issue. But net, I think EVs, the main thing is it's the way to low CO2 future.
Right. So let me ask you a couple of questions about the engine itself. So for someone who's trying to understand a motor in an electric vehicle, so let's say in this case a scooter, and I'm going to go into that a little more, is similar to maybe, let's say, the motor that drives my ceiling fan in the house. Would that be correct?
Absolutely. It could be that, or it could be even a high torque motor which drives elevators. In fact, initially, there was a lot of poaching happening from elevator companies to car companies, because these people understood high torque motors, which, you know, elevators did. So it is. So it's basically the same. It's a very, very simple form of propulsion, electric motors, so whatever it does. So whether it's a fan, whether it's an elevator, or whether it's even a car, you've got a charge, a current which goes into the motor, fed off by a battery. Obviously, you've got a lot of peripherals like actuators and controllers, battery management systems, which kind of control the way the motor is run. Much more complex in a car, because obviously it's not running at one speed the way a fan would, you know, which is by the 1, 2, 3, but it's fixed. But it's very, very variable, and for that you obviously need a lot more technology. Of course, the battery is the heart of any electric vehicle. And as you know, electric current is the heart of any electric motor. So either it's run off from the mains, which is your house, or if it's portable, which of course, all our a lot of devices are, it is the battery. So the battery and the motor are intrinsically linked the same way fuel, what goes into your tank, and an IC engine are intrinsically linked.
Right. So the battery or the advances in battery technology is the reason why electric vehicles, whether it's cars or two-wheelers, are now closer to us and within our reach, as it were. So tell us about batteries now. When I buy an electric vehicle, should I be thinking about what the battery is, and is it safe? What are the factors that are at work?
Well, the battery technology is evolving. Earlier, in the early days, the battery was lead acid. So that small move now to lithium ion. There are multiple formulas of lithium ion which people are working on. There are different kinds of cells in that. It could be a pouch cell or a cylindrical cell. These are all the various technologies. But basically, it's a lithium ion pack. That's what it is. That's what the material is. And, that leads to a greater question is that, what are the repercussions of lithium mining, sourcing lithium? Obviously, India, we don't have any reserves of lithium. Will we be dependent on China? Will we be dependent on this certain amount of cobalt also coming, which comes from Africa and, the Congo over there? The mining practices are questionable, the kind of labor they use. So these are, broader questions we have to look at. But fundamentally, just looking at the technology, right now, the universal technology is lithium ion. And it's really making those lithium ion battery packs more efficient and more importantly, even cheaper, driving the cost down. So it's making them more efficient, giving them more range and bringing the cost down, which has really been the trigger point for EVs to take off and make them somewhat practical. They're still far away from that, but somewhat practical.
Right. So, and instead of a fuel tank, you obviously have a battery, which is, I'm sure, much heavier than a tank of fuel would be.
That's right.
So, how does this or other factors impinge on the very construction of the vehicle, whether it's a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler, and the way the model or the car or the two-wheeler in question is built up or put together?
So, as you said, it's all around the battery, which replaces the fuel tank. Now the batteries are much heavier, in fact, and they are costly. In most cases, both in terms of they form a large proportion of the weight and the cost of a vehicle. Especially in a car, the weight can go up by 250 kilos or 300 kilos, which is a lot. And even the cost can go up dramatically. So that's really the biggest, I would say, in a way, the hurdle for EVs is really this whole cost issue of the batteries. And then, of course, there's the charging issue because in a petrol pump, I think, with IC engines, it's so easy to refuel. I mean, in an EV, you can't go somewhere and get a bucket of volts and go on. If you run out of charge, you're stuck. The only way to get back is have the car put on a flatbed. You can't even tow these cars because the motors all get locked up. It's not like you can put it in neutral and have it towed at all. So they have to be kind of so it gets complicated. And
so that's interesting, Hormazd. I didn't know this. So you're saying that an electric vehicle or a car particularly cannot be towed?
Typically, no, they can't. Yeah. So that's how it is because it's all it's all, it runs on electricity. Yeah. So and a lot of them don't because also it damages some of the motors, the brushes, all that sort of thing. If it's not done in the proper way, which is to have it working normally. Right. So then of course it's not that if you're running out of juice, you can go somewhere and charge. Even if you had a plug point, which you can have, it would take a long time to give you enough charge to get home. So this is the biggest worry, and that's why you have this thing called range anxiety, which kind of engulfs or overwhelms a lot of EV owners. They always have that one eye on the range meter because the last thing you want to do is get stuck. It's very inconvenient. Though there's a lot of innovations for that. You have these portable vehicles which come up to you with a big battery on it, so they can give you a little bit of a top-up charge, just a little bit to get home. But again, it's not very practical.
Right. And, when we look at advertisements for two-wheelers, let's say, classically, whether it's in India or overseas, the emphasis is on power, performance, top speed, and so on. all of this, I'm assuming, is not or cannot be so much of a focus when it comes to electric vehicles, particularly two-wheelers. Would that be a fair statement? And if so, or if not, what is then the pull?
So, I mean, you need to have you have to have a minimum level of performance. I mean, you've got a lot of two-wheelers right now, which are very low voltage two-wheelers. They're very cheap, but, it just doesn't give you the minimum level of riding pleasure or experience. They're super slow. Top speed is sometimes capped at 20-25 kilometers an hour. The range isn't great. So, these are really huge compromises. I think the newer generation, which we've seen with Bajaj, with TVS, Simply One, and now, of course, everyone's talking about Ola. They come with a pretty high voltage thing, which gives you a good level of performance. And above everything, what the big advantage of electric vehicles, which everyone loves, is that instant torque. Meaning the power is just phenomenal from the get-go. Unlike an IC engine, by nature of it has to build up the pulling power or the torque. But in an EV, it's there from zero, from the get-go. So the whole riding experience is actually, it feels much more faster or nimbler and brisker and quicker than anything else, just because of that instant response. And anyone who drives a vehicle, you want that linearity, you want that responsiveness, because it just makes it easy to drive. So I think, performance is very much a part of the experience of an EV.
Right. And, so if I were to ask you, or someone were to ask you, should I buy an EV? I live in Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad. Should I buy one, number one? And if I do buy one, what should be the determining factor in choosing that EV? For instance, I was reading that some EVs are offering all kinds of cool, gosh stuff on the console. You have telemetry and GPS ring fencing and music and all of that. So is that useful? Or essentially, what should people be looking for as the most important things?
I mean, look, that stuff is it's there, but a lot of the connected features are there in regular cars as well, because that's not really linked to an electric motor. It's linked to an electronics architecture, which both can have. But I think buying an EV, I think several things determine it. One is you have to understand that right now, because of the battery cost, it's much more expensive than a conventional car. And I think the best reference point we have that is the Nexon, because that's the only car which comes with both an IC engine and electric motor. And over there, it is still a couple of lakhs more expensive. But I think with all the subsidies, that price is coming down. Don't forget, the government is giving more subsidies. Also, Tata Motors, I think, their margins are much tighter on EVs, which, because they're passing on a lot to the customer. So let's take the Nexon EV as a good example. Now, that has a range, a real world range, I would say, of around 180 to 200 kilometers, but let's be on 180 side. If you're driving in the city, that's more than enough. You really don't need more than that. But so for city driving, it's absolutely fine. And that's the thing about EVs. They're just good for the city. They can't be your, let's say, single car, because if you want to go out of town, you'll have a problem. The charging network isn't there. Plus, there's too much drama on the range dropping and all that. So it's difficult to take it out of town. But if you're in the city, it's very, very practical. But you have to ensure two things: that you have dedicated parking with a charging point. And once you have that, either at home or at office, it is super practical, super easy to use it in town as a pure city vehicle. So I think these factors need to be thought of when buying an EV. Just to sum up, only for city use, and ensure that you're never far from a plug, which is either at home or office with a dedicated parking.
Right. So, and on charging, I mean, I'm sure everyone asks you that question as well. I mean, so we do have some charging infrastructure, but that's obviously at ground level. And if I'm in the 5th floor of an apartment complex and my car is downstairs, I have to find a solution to that. And secondly, would it be fair to say that charging infrastructure continues to grow? I mean, it's not that much today, but it continues to grow.
It continues to grow, but not at the pace of the demand and sales of electric vehicles, unfortunately. And right now, electric vehicle demand has gone through the roof. In fact, manufacturers can't supply enough of them, and it's largely triggered by the high price of petrol. So, but we just don't have the charging infrastructure. Yes, charging infrastructure is there, but it doesn't give you the convenience and security and reassurance of having it, It doesn't give you the reassurance of having it, at your home. So, I mean, you can go to a public charger, but, sometimes what if there's another car over there or it's not working? These things do happen, or there's some issue, and it's not just in India. It's globally as well. I mean, I know I've been in the UK, and there are a lot of issues with they don't charge, they don't take your card, it's not working. Some cars already parked over there, and there's this new issue where if you get iced, which is a new term, which I also experienced just now when I was in Switzerland. But luckily, I had a plug-in hybrid, so I could go back on the IC engine, which is when an IC vehicle comes and takes your parking slot because it's empty when it's supposed to be only for an EV. So that's what you get when you get iced, So you have these dedicated slots only for EVs, but some guy goes and parks there, then you can't charge. So these are all issues which make the dependence on public infrastructure still a bit of a hit and miss. But if you have it at home, you know that when you come home, you can plug in and you're reassured that by overnight, you'll have a full charge and you're ready to go the next day.
Within a city. Last question, Hormazd. Driving experience, and you did hint at it a little earlier, but how do you feel? I mean, is there a sense of fulfillment? I mean, once upon a time, people bought cars and bikes apart from getting from point A to point B, but also for the thrill of it. Can electric vehicles be thrilling to ride, or should one just focus on the utility?
No, absolutely. I think, honestly, it's a very novel experience right now. Firstly, there is a sense of feel good in the sense that, you're driving something non-polluting, which is really the need of the hour. I wouldn't call it polluting because, I think the need of the hour is reducing your carbon footprint as much as possible. I think that really should be a mission for every individual as much as, we go forward. I mean, you're talking about temperatures rising by 1.5 to 3 degrees in the coming decades, which is going to be terrible because to reverse that will take several lifetimes for that to happen. So, I think that's one thing which you feel good about. It's a zero carbon footprint with that. I wouldn't say zero because, in the let's say there are other issues.
There is coal being burned somewhere.
Yeah. Then the other thing also is the ease of driving. People don't realize how convenient it is to drive. There are no gears, there's no jerks, there's no lag, there's no kind of, you can't feel any gear changes because there are none, and the silence of it all. So all these factors kind of come together to give you a very relaxed driving experience, a very easy driving experience. And honestly, in the city, you can get addicted to the way an EV drives because it's got everything you want. It's got super response. It's very, very easy to handle. You don't have to struggle with other peripherals, as I said, like gears, that sort of thing, or an engine characteristic. So it's a novelty right now, but I think very soon people will get used to it. The only thing I don't like about EVs is that all of them are very one-dimensional. They all sort of feel the same. That instant torque, which then kind of tapers off as you go faster.
Okay. There had to be a flip side. On that note, Hormazd, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thanks, Govind. Good to talk to you. And thanks. All the best.